All right, so you've tuned in for another deep dive, and today we're looking at how things get made.
Okay.
And I mean, pretty much anything, from like software to like a whole new room in your house. We're
Yeah,
talking about all the words and all the processes behind bringing ideas to life,
right.
especially through business analysis, which is what our source material is all about today.
Exactly. And you know what? You shared a really interesting piece that explains this whole world that often feels really technical, with all the jargon,
Yeah.
but it does it in a way that's totally relatable. Building a new kitchen.
Oh, yeah. I like that.
So in this deep dive, we're on a mission to make all those terms clear, like crystal clear.
Okay.
So you can really see how projects are managed. And this is key. How what you want, your needs and desires, how those are understood, and how they actually get turned into something
And that whole
real.
kitchen analogy, that's going to be like our guide, right? It's like the foundation for understanding these ideas. The text you gave me uses it so well to show some pretty complex stuff, so we'll be sticking with it through the whole conversation.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's get into it. When you're building something, anything really, there are like different ways to approach the actual building part, right?
Absolutely. The source talks about these things called methodologies and frameworks.
Okay.
You can think of them like totally different strategies for tackling a project or different structured plans.
Gotcha.
So the first one is agile.
Agile? Okay. So is this like, imagine you're doing that kitchen renovation.
Yeah.
Instead of having every tiny detail decided on day one,
Uh-huh.
Agile is like doing it in stages.
Right.
Maybe focusing on just one area at a time.
Yeah.
So like say putting in all the base cabinets first. You
System.
get those in, you actually see how they look, how they feel in the space.
Yeah.
Maybe you realize you actually want deeper drawers in that corner cabinet instead of just shelves. And the source mentions these short cycles, often just 2 weeks.
Yeah, they're important.
What's so cool about Agile is that it's flexible.
Yeah.
Like if you're halfway through and you decide, wait, I actually want drawers instead of shelves in that cabinet,
Yeah.
it's not this huge, crazy change.
Yeah, it's not a big deal at all.
And that's such a good point because it's not just about speed.
Right.
It's about learning and being able to adapt as you go along.
Exactly.
So building on this whole idea of making progress in stages, we have Scrum.
Okay, Scrum.
So if Agile is all about this flexible step-by-step way of doing things,
Yeah.
Scrum is like saying, okay, let's take this entire kitchen renovation and break it down into smaller projects,
Yeah, exactly.
like way smaller, more focused.
Right.
The source uses these examples of like cabinets, then countertops, then lighting.
Yep, those are good examples.
So we treat each of those like a mini project,
Uh-huh.
and we tackle those in these super short bursts called sprints.
Yeah, and each of those mini projects, whether it's cabinets or countertops or lighting,
Yep.
those all get done in a specific sprint, which is usually, just like Agile, about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And one really important part of Scrum, something the source emphasizes, is this daily huddle or a daily stand-up.
Oh, yeah, those really quick check-ins, like what did we do yesterday, what are we doing today kind of thing.
Yeah, and are there any problems?
Right, it's like the whole construction crew having a mini meeting every single morning.
Right on site.
Just to stay on the same page, everyone knows what's happening.
And they know if there are any problems early on.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? The source actually compares these adaptable ways of working with a much more traditional way, which is waterfall.
Waterfall. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about waterfall.
So imagine this. You plan every single tiny detail of your new kitchen. Everything. The layout, all the materials, the finishes, everything.
Okay.
You sign off on all of it, and only then does the actual construction work begin.
Okay.
And here's the really important part. Once the work starts, making changes is super difficult and usually pretty expensive.
That sounds kind of scary, like there's no going back.
It is.
But I guess the source is saying that it can work if you have a super clear idea of what you want from the very beginning.
Yeah, if your vision is totally set,
Like if you know exactly what you want and you're totally sure it won't change.
yeah, then waterfall can be really efficient.
Okay, so what if you're not totally sure about every single detail?
That's where we get the hybrid model.
Hybrid model. Okay, so what's that all about?
It's basically like a mix of all these different approaches. You take the best parts of each.
So like the best of both worlds, depending on what you're doing.
Exactly. The example in the source is perfect for this.
Okay.
So you finalize the plumbing and electrical plans right up front.
Okay.
That's your waterfall part, because you really can't change those once work begins.
Right, and it's super important to get those right.
For safety and stuff, yeah.
Gotcha.
But then for other stuff, like the backsplash design
Yeah.
or the layout of your kitchen island,
Okay.
you might use an agile approach there. That way you can experiment and make adjustments as you go.
Yeah, based on how things actually look.
Yeah, and how you actually use the space.
I like it. So we've been talking about these sprints quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
Let's really break down what a sprint actually is.
Okay, so a sprint, it's defined in the source as a fixed period of time,
Okay.
usually 2 weeks.
All right.
And during that time, the team is committed to finishing a specific set of tasks.
Okay.
So going back to that tiling example,
Yeah.
it's like saying, our goal for this 2-week sprint is to have all the kitchen tiles done.
Got it.
So you've got that fixed time frame, which creates focus, a sense of urgency, and a really clear short-term objective.
It's like a deadline.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so before each of these sprints starts,
Yeah.
there's this thing called sprint planning.
Right.
What happens during sprint planning?
So basically, the team comes together,
Okay.
and they decide what work they can realistically finish within that upcoming sprint.
Mm.
So with our kitchen, it's like that planning meeting with your contractor and their team.
Yeah.
You talk about what needs to get done in the next 2 weeks.
Right.
What's actually achievable, given how many people you have, the materials, and of course, the time.
So when the team is doing sprint planning,
Yeah.
are they basically picking a set of those smaller tasks from a bigger list?
That's it.
Like those user stories we'll talk about later.
Exactly. User stories are those little actionable tasks for each sprint.
Perfect. Okay, so then during the sprint,
Yeah.
we have those daily stand-ups we mentioned.
Right.
Just quick check-ins with everyone.
Super quick, usually no more than 15 minutes.
Okay.
Everyone says what they worked on yesterday, what they're doing today, and if anything is blocking them.
Like a quick morning meeting on the construction site to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly.
Okay, so the sprint ends. Hopefully all the tiles are done.
Let's hope so.
What happens at the very end of the sprint? There's the sprint review, right?
Yeah, the sprint review is where the team shows everyone what they finished during that sprint.
Okay.
In our analogy, that's you, the homeowner.
You're right.
So the construction crew would show you the finished tiling,
Okay.
explain what they did, talk about any challenges they had,
Uh-huh.
and answer any questions you have.
But it's not just about showing off what they achieved, right?
That's not.
There's also a chance to look back and think about what could have gone better.
Right.
And that's the sprint retrospective.
Yes, the sprint retrospective is all about continuous improvement.
Okay.
After each sprint, the team spends some time thinking about how it went.
Yeah.
What went well, what didn't go so well.
Uh-huh.
But most importantly, what can they do to improve for the next sprint?
So it's like having a little debrief with your contractor after each phase.
Yeah, a post-project chat.
Like what problems came up, how can we avoid them next time?
Right, in the next part of the build.
So let's say we're building this kitchen using these short sprints.
Oh.
We're probably not aiming to have the whole perfect finished kitchen after just one sprint.
No, not at all.
That brings us to the idea of a minimum viable product, or MVP.
Yeah, the MVP.
What is that?
It's the most basic but functional version of the product, so in our case, the kitchen.
Okay.
It needs to be usable, so you could cook a simple meal and wash dishes.
All right.
But it's definitely not the fully renovated, amazing kitchen you see in magazines.
Right, but it's like a starting point.
Exactly. And the source gives a good example. A working stove, a sink that works, and a fridge.
So you've got the essentials.
Yeah, and the whole point of the MVP is to get something working out there early.
Okay.
And then you add more features and make it better in the following sprints.
So like later you can get those fancy imported tiles and that super high-tech oven.
Exactly. But first you need to see what works.
Yeah, and what actually needs to be improved.
Right. You can start using it, see what's really missing for your everyday cooking,
Okay.
and then you prioritize those improvements for later.
So it's not just about being fast, it's also about testing your assumptions early on.
Exactly.
Like what kind of feedback can you get from that very first basic kitchen?
Oh, tons. You can see what works, what doesn't work.
Right.
What's missing from your day-to-day experience in the kitchen.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that helps you plan better for the next stages.
Okay, so we have our MVP, our basic working kitchen.
Yeah,
Naturally, you'd want to check it out, make sure it actually does what you need it to do.
of course.
That's where we get user acceptance testing, or UAT.
UAT.
What's that all about?
Basically, it's you, the user, testing the product,
Uh,
or in this case, your new MVP kitchen.
right.
You're making sure that everything actually works as you expect it to,
Gotcha.
and that it meets your basic needs before you give the okay for that phase to be finished.
So I'm turning on the stove, making sure it heats up,
Right.
trying the sink, checking the water pressure, opening and closing the fridge.
Make sure everything works as it should.
Yeah, making sure the core functions are good to go.
Exactly.
Now, the source also talks about shift left testing.
Yeah,
I really like that idea. It's about not waiting until the very end of the whole project to start checking things.
that's right.
Right.
Yeah, it's about integrating testing earlier into the whole process.
Okay.
So in our kitchen, this would be like testing the plumbing for leaks,
Yeah.
but doing it before the walls are up.
Oh, that's smart.
It's about catching problems when they're easier to fix.
Yeah, when they're small and not expensive to fix.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered all the different ways we can approach the actual building.
Uh,
But what about all the paperwork, all the records that are created while we're doing this?
Yeah,
The source calls these documentation and artifacts.
right. Documentation and artifacts.
Let's start with requirements gathering.
Okay, so requirements gathering is that very first step.
Right.
And it's super important because it's all about understanding what you, the client, actually need and want from this project.
Oh.
It's like our first conversations, where I, as the business analyst, would ask you tons of questions.
Okay.
Like, what kind of vibe are you going for with this new kitchen?
Yeah.
Do you want a big island in the middle? How many cabinets do you think you'll need?
Right.
What kind of stove do you want? Gas or electric? Are there any appliances you absolutely have to have?
So all of those initial conversations, all those wishes,
Yeah, all of that.
they get written down in a formal document, right?
That's right. It's called the Business Requirements Document, or BRD.
The BRD. Okay, so that's like a summary of everything I want in my new kitchen.
Exactly. It might say things like,
Okay.
the kitchen needs to have a big island where you can prep food and eat.
All right.
It has to have a built-in energy-efficient dishwasher
Okay.
and a really big pantry for all your food.
Gotcha. So it's the overall vision for the project.
Exactly. Think of the BID as your big vision.
Okay.
And then the next document, the Functional Requirement Specification. That's the detailed blueprint that the builders will actually use.
Okay.
It takes all those desires and turns them into concrete instructions.
So that's the functional requirements specification, or FRS.
Right, FRS.
And that's where we get into the nitty-gritty detail.
Exactly. The FRS takes all those things from the BRD and breaks them down into really specific, actionable details.
Okay.
So the construction team can actually build it.
Gotcha.
So, for example, if the BRD mentions a pantry,
Yeah.
the FRS would say exactly how big it needs to be.
Right.
The pantry must be 6 feet tall, right next to the fridge for easy access, and it needs at least 5 shelves that can each hold 50 pounds.
So it's like the super detailed technical
We'll
instructions.
say the blueprint.
The source also talks about use cases.
Oh yeah, use cases.
What are those all about?
So use case is like a little story about how the finished kitchen will actually be used.
Okay.
The example they give is the homeowner wants to make a complicated dinner and they need to be able to get to all their spices without stopping what they're doing. So it's really focused on the user's goals
Mm-hmm.
and how the kitchen design will help them do those specific things.
So it's all about how it's actually used in real life.
Exactly.
Now, I'm sure during a project like a kitchen reno, things change along the way.
They always do.
Like you might see a totally different countertop that you fall in love with.
yeah, it happens all the time.
Or like in the example, you decide you want navy blue cabinets instead of white.
Right.
That's where a change request comes in.
Yes, a change request is a document that captures any changes to the original plan.
Okay.
But it's not just about writing down the change,
Right.
like wanting those navy blue cabinets. It's also about figuring out how that change will affect the timeline, the budget,
Okay.
and everything else about the renovation.
So it's not a simple change, it has ripple effect.
Exactly.
Okay, so to make sure each part of the work is done just the way I want it,
Uh-huh.
we have acceptance criteria.
Right. Acceptance criteria.
That sounds like a helpful checklist.
It is a checklist. It's a set of conditions that have to be met
Okay.
for a task or a feature to be considered done and acceptable by you, the client.
Gotcha.
So they give this example. All cabinet doors should open and close smoothly and quietly. No squeaking or sticking.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of a measurable acceptance criterion.
Okay, so the source then talks about epics and user stories.
Right.
It sounds like they're really important for breaking down a big project into smaller pieces.
They are. An epic is a big chunk of work,
Okay.
a major part of the project. So with our kitchen renovation,
Yeah.
an epic could be build the main cooking area.
Okay.
It would include everything about the stove, the microwave, the countertops around it.
Gotcha.
User stories are smaller tasks within an epic.
Okay.
They're more specific and actionable.
Right.
The example they give is, as a cook, I want to pull out spice rack near the stove so I can easily reach my spices while I'm cooking.
Right.
User stories are usually written from the point of view of the person using the thing, in this case, the cook.
That makes a lot of sense. So to really understand who we're designing and building this kitchen for.
Yeah.
The source mentions personas.
Personas, they're like these made-up but realistic profiles of your ideal user.
So in this case, the person who's going to be using the kitchen the most.
Exactly.
Okay.
They're based on research, and they help the whole team understand and design the space
Right.
with that specific person's needs and habits in mind.
Gotcha.
So the example they give is Rita, a busy mom who cooks healthy meals every day for her family.
Okay.
So she needs lots of easy-to-reach storage for fresh food and cooking equipment.
Right.
This helps everyone focus on her needs and the challenges she faces in the kitchen.
It's like saying, we're not just building any kitchen, we're building Rita's kitchen.
Sure.
And Rita needs these specific things because of her busy life.
Yeah, that's the idea.
I like it. So building on that whole understanding the user thing, we have journey mapping, which sounds like it's about showing the whole experience someone has with the finished product.
That's right. Journey mapping shows the whole experience a user goes through
Okay.
as they interact with the product.
Yeah.
So with our kitchen,
Yeah.
it could be Rita going through the whole process of planning a meal, prepping the food,
Yeah.
cooking it, serving it, and cleaning up afterwards,
Okay.
all in her new kitchen. So this visual way of showing things, it helps us find any points where things might be difficult for her, where she might get frustrated, and it also shows us where we can make things better.
Okay. So to keep track of all the requirements and make sure nothing gets missed or forgotten, there's the traceability matrix.
The traceability matrix, it's super organized.
Okay, what is it exactly?
Basically, it's a table that links each requirement we talked about.
Yeah.
From those initial conversations to the BRD and the FRS
Okay.
to the specific things in the finished kitchen that actually fulfill those requirements.
Gotcha.
So it's like a way to double check that everything you wanted in the kitchen
Yeah.
is actually there in the final build.
So nothing gets missed. Okay. And lastly, in this section on documentation, we have the RAID log.
The RAID log, oh yeah.
That sounds like something you don't want to end up in.
Oh, actually, you definitely want to have a RAID log.
Okay.
RAID stands for risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies.
Okay.
The RAID log is where we keep track of all of these things throughout the entire project.
Gotcha.
So the example they give is risk. The custom granite countertop we chose might take longer to deliver than we thought,
Yeah.
which could delay the whole countertop installation.
Right.
So by tracking all these potential risks, assumptions, problems, and dependencies,
Okay.
the team can plan ahead and prevent problems, or at least be ready if they do happen.
Wow. So you're actually expecting things to go wrong and planning for it.
That's the idea.
That's interesting. It's like a shift in mindset.
It is. It's about being realistic and prepared.
Instead of being totally surprised if something goes wrong.
Exactly.
Okay, so we talked about how to approach the work, how to document everything.
Uh-huh.
Now, how do we decide what to work on first?
That's where prioritization comes in.
Okay, and the source mentions Moscow prioritization.
Moscow. It's a great way to prioritize things.
And I like that acronym. It's easy to remember.
It is. It helps everyone decide which requirements are most important.
Okay.
So it stands for must have, should have, could have, and won't have.
All right, I'm following.
So for our kitchen renovation, must have items are the absolute essentials.
Like what?
A working stove, a sink with running water, and enough lighting.
Okay, those make sense. You can't really have a kitchen without those.
Right. Then there are the should have items.
Okay.
They're important and they add a lot of value,
All right.
but they're not absolutely critical for a basic kitchen.
So like what?
A built-in dishwasher, for example.
Okay, that's a good one.
Then we have the could have items.
Either have, okay.
These are things that are nice to have, but you could do without them if you had to,
Okay.
maybe because of the budget or time constraints.
Gotcha. What would be a could have for the kitchen?
Maybe a dedicated wine fridge.
Oh yeah, nice to have, but not essential.
Exactly.
And finally, won't have items are things that are definitely not happening in this phase of the project.
Right.
So that would be like the fancy smart faucet I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Okay, then we have the backlog.
The backlog.
That sounds like it's a list of everything that still needs to be done for the kitchen.
That's it. It's a dynamic list. It keeps changing as things get done and new things come up.
Okay.
It's a list of all the tasks, features, improvements, and bug fixes.
Bug fixes, is that more of a software thing?
Yeah, but the idea is the same for any project.
Gotcha. So it's like the master to-do list for the kitchen.
Exactly.
And within the backlog, there's this thing called backlog refinement.
Right. Backlog refinement.
That sounds like regularly cleaning up that to-do list.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
So basically, the team goes through the backlog and they clarify things.
Yeah.
Make sure the descriptions are clear, maybe break down big tasks into smaller ones.
Okay.
They estimate how long each task will take
Uh-huh.
and make sure everything is ready to be worked on in the next sprint.
So it's like going through your kitchen to-do list,
Yeah,
adding more details, maybe crossing things off that you don't need to do anymore.
that's a good way to think about it.
So building a kitchen or any kind of product, really, it's
Yeah.
usually not a solo job.
It's
There's a lot of collaboration, different people working together.
absolutely.
The source mentions JAD sessions.
JAD sessions, those are really important.
What are they?
JAD stands for Joint Application Development Sessions.
Okay.
And they're meetings where everyone involved in the project comes together.
Okay.
So for our kitchen, that would be you, the homeowner,
Yeah.
the interior designer you might be working with,
Uh-huh.
the general contractor, and maybe even specialists like plumbers and electricians.
Wow. Everyone's there.
The main goal is to make sure everyone agrees on what the project needs,
Okay.
on the design decisions
Yeah.
and the overall goals.
And this all happens before work starts.
Yeah, before anything major begins.
That makes sense.
So everyone's on the same page.
And then making sure everyone is kept in the loop
Yeah.
and their needs are considered, that's stakeholder management.
That's it. Stakeholder management is about making sure everyone who cares about the project is involved.
Okay.
That includes your spouse who'll be using the kitchen,
Right.
the designer whose reputation is on the line,
Uh-huh.
everyone. So you need to talk to them,
Yeah.
understand what they need and expect, deal with their concerns,
Okay.
and keep them updated about how the project is going.
Makes sense. Now, hopefully everything goes smoothly during the renovation.
Fingers crossed.
But what happens if there's a big disagreement or something comes up that the team can't solve?
Yeah, then we need escalation.
Escalation. Okay, what's that?
It's the process of taking big problems or conflicts to a higher level,
Okay.
so someone with more authority can solve them.
Right.
The example the source gives is the contractor refusing to follow part of the agreed-upon design. That would definitely need escalation, maybe to a project manager
Okay.
or someone higher up in the construction company.
To get things back on track.
Exactly.
All right, lastly, the source talks about all these different tools and technologies.
Okay.
These are the things that actually help manage the whole process.
Yeah, they're the practical helpers.
The first one is JRA, and I hear that name all the time.
JRA is super popular, especially in software development.
Yeah.
The source describes it as a digital task board.
Okay.
So each task for the kitchen reno would be written up there,
Right.
assigned to the right person, like the cabinet installer or the electrician,
Uh-huh.
and you can see how far along each task is
Okay.
and easily update it when it's done.
So it's like a super organized digital checklist?
Yeah, it's like a whiteboard checklist, but way more powerful
Okay, cool.
with lots of features for communication and reporting and stuff.
Gotcha. Then there's Confluence, which sounds like a central place online for
Yeah.
all the project info.
That's right. Confluence is for documentation and knowledge management.
Okay.
It's like a shared notebook where everyone on the team can write down and find important information.
Like what?
Design specifications, meeting notes, how-to guides for installations,
Whoa.
decisions that were made, all of that stuff.
So it's like the project's brain.
Yeah, the central hub for all the knowledge.
Then for making visual representations, we have Lucidchart.
Lucidchart, that's a great tool.
What do you use it for?
It's for making all kinds of diagrams and flowcharts.
Okay.
So you can make process flows, organization charts,
Yeah.
and relevant to our kitchen, detailed floor plans and layouts.
Oh, that's useful.
It helps you visualize the space.
Okay. And for getting a sneak peek of what the finished kitchen will look like, there's Figma.
Figma, that's a cool one.
What is it?
It's for designing and prototyping, especially for digital products.
Okay.
But for our kitchen reno, designers could use it to create really detailed mock-ups.
Okay.
So you can see the layout, the cabinets, the appliances, everything.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's like a virtual tour of your kitchen before it's even built.
So you can really get a feel for it.
Exactly.
Okay, to keep an eye on the project's progress and spot any delays,
Uh-huh.
we have Power BI.
Power BI is all about data and insights.
Okay.
It lets you create these interactive dashboards and reports.
Right?
So with our kitchen project, you could track things like
Okay.
how many cabinets have been installed compared to the schedule,
Gotcha.
how long it took to do the plumbing or the electrical.
Okay.
And you could see really easily if anything is falling behind.
So you can stay on top of everything.
That's right.
Then for teams that aren't all in the same place,
Yeah.
there's Zoom, which is pretty much the standard for online meetings these days.
Everyone using Zoom.
And finally, Miro is described as a digital whiteboard.
Oh, yeah. Miro is awesome for collaboration.
Okay.
It's a shared workspace online where you can brainstorm ideas.